Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we got a lot to talk about today. First, let's talk about the latest information coming from the U.S. Census about immigration in this country, how immigrants are actually keeping U.S. cities afloat. We'll share with you some of the latest details. Also, I'm going to give you the latest around the city of Cleveland, Ohio, as we check in with the city council president there. And then later we talk to one sister about her story, about asking the question, are you my mother? How this has opened the big conversation around from everything from DNA testing to cancel culture. Plus, I'm checking with my brother Michael and Hotep. We talk about reparations in California. So we got a lot to get to. So to stay with us, it's the culture here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Let me just jump right in, folks, because I want to cover so many big conversations today. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about what's happening coming out of the U.S. Census Bureau, as they have shared a report earlier today stating that immigration is helping, is on the rise in the country, and more importantly, it is helping cities to stay afloat. Folks, this is coming out of the New York Times, where they put out this piece about immigration actually tripling in the top U.S. counties, even as many of them have lost population. Let me share with you what a little bit of what this means according to the Times and to this latest report, folks. Take a look at this. It says that the number of immigrants nearly tripled in the nation's 20 most populous counties from 2021 to 2022. As immigration returned to pre-pandemic levels nationally, the Census Bureau reported today, but many of these counties are still losing residents to suburbs, exurbs, and other regions of the country. And like the rest of the nation, they are feeling the brunt of the nation's low birth rate. Those trends emerged from the latest figures in counties nationwide, revealing that the country is growing slowly, but that many communities are struggling to maintain population levels. Now, here's the thing, folks, that since prior to the pandemic, the country was growing at a rate of about 2%. Right now, it's growing at a rate of less than 1%, less than half of a 1%, actually. But they're saying that immigration is growing, and in a lot of cities, and in a lot of counties in particular, that immigration is helping to keep some of these areas on top of things. Now, here's the second piece about this. Take a look. Although the nation's top 20 largest counties gained more than 300,000 new residents between July 2021 and July 2022 through international migration, which consists mostly of immigrants, but includes anybody that moved to the U.S. from overseas. For some of these counties, such as San Diego, Miami-Dade, and King County in Washington, which includes Seattle, immigration stabilized the population numbers, which otherwise would have decreased. For others, the decline slowed somewhat. I want to get your take on this to my crew. I want to hear from y'all to get y'all thoughts on this as we looking at the situation. What do you make of this? And again, this is coming from the New York Times, based upon a new report that the United States Census Bureau has put out earlier today. What do you make of this as we're looking at the situation of immigration? And this is why I'm thinking that this is something that needs to be discussed, because if there is a tripling of the immigrant population in this country, that changes the dynamics, not just in the geographics, that's not even just in the demographics of things, but it changes the dynamics on policy. It changes the dynamic on resources. It changes the dynamic on social services, everything from education to taxes. I mean, there are so many implications of this rise. And it's one of the things that it mentioned in the New York Times piece is that these cities, a lot of these cities, even I'm talking about your big cities, folks, you know, from LA to New York City, a lot of these cities if it wasn't for this influx of immigrants coming into these cities would not be at the same population that they were before the pandemic. Now, the one area that this is not affecting quite as much is New York City in the area of Manhattan. Manhattan is what they consider to be an outlier of this whole scenario. So Manhattan is actually growing, is showing signs of growth as a result of immigration. Now, you know that Manhattan has also created a space for asylum seekers there. Manhattan has traditionally, New York City has traditionally been a space, of course, for immigrants from across the waters to come in and call it home there. But Manhattan seems to be one of the top outliers for immigrants, and more importantly, top outliers for a major part of the city not falling as a result of people moving out. I want to get your thoughts on this very quickly. Post your comments on our chat. I would love to talk to you folks about what do you think about this as we looking at this immigration situation out of the U.S. Census Bureaus. And for me, I'm thinking about this. If we're talking about folks coming from across the waters, and this is any immigrants, this is not related to Europe or Africa or the Caribbean island, this is anybody. If people are coming across the water and they are deciding that that they want to call America home, then that means that everything is going to have to change. We're going to have to have a serious conversation in this country about what does that look like in America. I can tell you here in Los Angeles, folks, Black people only make up about 8 to 9% of the LA city population. But those who are coming across the waters, those who are coming up, from our Hispanic and Latino nations, you have brother the Oaxacan community. You have those from Honduras. South America, Latin America, of course, Brazil. You have all of these different people. And then you got to think about, okay, the policies cannot be as rigid as they are. The money that we spend in this country on trying to keep things afloat has to be spent elsewhere, right? Because now you have to create a space for all of these people. There are communities, not just here in Los Angeles, but in other cities across this country, right, where you find that, and I was reading about this, there's an area here in LA called the Pico community, where they are one of the most populous communities in LA City, but it's also one of the poorest communities because there are so many immigrants that have arrived into that neighborhood, and that you have so many folks in one household that it's creating, and of course, some of these folks, whether they're quote unquote legal or illegal, whether these folks are working or not, that is just creating a real problem. So there are some far-reaching implications around this issue. If you have immigrants coming in from around the world, or you have immigrants coming in from other parts of the world, and they're calling America home. Now, this does not include, that's happening on one end, but then on the other end, you got folks that have migrated out of these major cities, and as I just mentioned in that quote excerpts. And these are places like vacation spots. More people are moving to areas where you would normally go once a year, maybe like a sunnier area. Now they're finding that a lot of people are deciding to call these vacation places home. So this is very, very interesting. Let me go to my crew, folks, and let me hear from you. Corinna checking in. Always good to hear from you, Corinna. You said many New Yorkers that lived in quote unquote the city, as New Yorkers call it, moved into Brooklyn. Because maybe that's why Manhattan has the space. Brooklyn is also on the list there, Corinna. You should take a look at it. Again, it's in the New York Times piece, but this is based on a U.S. Census report that came out, Brooklyn is also on the list in terms of one of the areas that could potentially see a difference because of the immigrant population. But if that's what's happening in New York, I can only imagine what's happening in other places, right? And like I said, these are looking at counties. So for example, LA County had lost about 90,000 people, and I want to make sure I'm gonna get this number right, but 90,000 residents, whereas last year in 2021, excuse me, this was in 2022, in 2021, it was over 150,000 people that had left LA County. But there are so many people coming in and going out of major areas like Los Angeles, New York City, and whatnot. They're moving around. So the demographics of this country is changing. And I was kind of thinking about calling this segment "The Browning of America Continues," right? Because if you all remember, there was years ago there were some predictions that by I think it was like 2030 or 2040, that essentially that white people will become the minorities and brown folks, and that includes black people, folks from Latin America, folks from Africa, and all those folks. Dark-skinned people would become the majority in this country. And we made, back, I remember the conversation a little bit because I was just younger then, but I remember a little bit of the conversation back then. People were like, this is never going to happen. We got to stop this from happening. And then you had individuals like Pat Buchanan who talked about these things, who said, look, this is going to happen. What is the Republican Party, for example, going to do with it? What is America going to move forward on it? Newt Gingrich, other folks like them, conservatives, who were really concerned about this. And now we're starting to see more of this situation play out. Monkey Confessions, you said, as Black American homeless rates increase in those cities. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing a lot of people in LA, Baltimore, and other places. More and more Black people are becoming more homeless, and more of the immigrant population is on the street as well. This is a problem. Look, folks, we're going to take a quick pause. I wanted to throw that out there to you. We're going to certainly talk about it a little bit more in the next few shows. We'll talk a little bit about it. I'm going to check in with Mr. Blaine Griffin from the Cleveland, Ohio City Council. He serves as the City Council President in the next segment. We're going to talk to him. I'm going to get his thoughts on this because there's some things happening in the city of Cleveland around population decline that we should discuss. So we'll discuss that and so much more. So stay with us. The conversations are just getting started right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the culture here on the Black Star Network. We want to now welcome our first guest for today's show. He serves as the City Council President for the city of Cleveland, Ohio. And we want to welcome him to the airways of Black Star Network and the culture, Mr. Blaine Griffin. Mr. Griffin, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon. How you doing today, Mr. Muhammad?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the great city of Cleveland, Ohio. Let me just start the conversation off first, looking at this because we just kicked it off, talking about the population decline in cities across the country, as well as the growth of immigration in this country. I came across some numbers, and Keenan, I want you to throw these numbers up about Cleveland, Ohio. Because I think that this is actually very, very interesting to see that Cleveland is going through some growth as well. There's a declining population in Cleveland. This is based off of the United States Census Bureau's data about Cleveland. Cleveland is now home to 367,991 people. The city of Cleveland's population declined by 546,817. or 59.8% since 1950, folks. So we're talking about 73 years ago. Over these past 73 years, there's been nearly a 60% drop in the population in the city of Cleveland, when its population totaled nearly 1,914,808 people. Over that period, the city went from the 7th most populous in the United States to the 54th most populous in the United States. Mr. Griffin, talk to us about this. This is, and I'm bringing this up because I think a lot of cities are challenged by the same thing that the city of Cleveland is. I'm from Baltimore, and one of the things that I've seen in Baltimore is our population has declined as well. So what do you make of that as the city council president? Is this something that's on your mind, especially, as you're trying to revitalize and do the work of rebuilding the city?
Well, Brother Muhammad, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be on your show, and to all the Black Star Network. I'm really a big fan of Black journalism and Black media, so I think this is huge. You're exactly right. Cleveland is a city that was built for about 1 million people. Now we have approximately 372,000 or so, give or take. The census had it at 372,000. But not just Cleveland, we actually sit in a county as well, which is Cuyahoga County, which is experiencing the most population loss in the city of Cleveland. There's a couple of reasons for that. And so, yes, to your question, population dynamics is something that I am very keenly aware of, and something that we have as a priority in the city of Cleveland, because quite frankly, we need to grow the Black middle class and the middle class in general, from all races in the city of Cleveland. But what's happening in Ohio, which is Ohio is also losing populations. I was watching your show earlier, and it's pretty much because of a few things that you just mentioned. One is people of color, brown people, BIPOC communities are starting to grow in population. So Ohio is getting older and more white, whereas the rest of the country is getting darker and younger. Which is something that's creating an interesting dynamic, as well as a lot of young professionals moving to down south, Atlanta, the Southwest. But we have a couple of key things that we believe could bring this city, region, and area back.
Wow. So let's talk about that work. And I think that is an interesting dynamic to kind of work in, because if Ohio is getting older and whiter and the rest of the country is getting darker and younger, then that must create some real tension for individuals like yourself and others who are trying to reconcile and really trying to navigate through like that turbulent landscape. Talk to us a little bit about how is the city of Cleveland working to address that?
Well, making sure that our policies and budget priorities line up to serve the population who we represent, which, to be honest with you, is a Dickensian model of a city where we have a very affluent community in certain pockets of the city of Cleveland that are growing in places like Ohio City, Tremont, University Circle, Little Italy, where I serve as the council person. But we also have to have a government that actually sets policies and budgets that serve poor people. that are making sure that we are serving a lot of the single mothers that we have left behind. We don't like to be at the bottom of the list. And I'm a person that speaks from a point of being the cup half full as opposed to the cup half empty. So what we really try to focus on is where we can build on our strengths. And our strengths are our water source, where as I look out my window, we have 1/5 of the world's fresh water with Lake Erie and access to all of the lakes. We also focus on our healthcare institutions. And also, we look at eradicating racism at every step of the way, whether it be in housing, infrastructure, and the environment, whether it be in healthcare and disparities. In a portion of the area that I represent, we have the lowest life expectancy in the entire county, sometimes 20 years worse than some of the more affluent areas. We have to focus on educational disparities. We have to create wealth. And that's different than just getting a job and economic development, but creating wealth in the Black community and impoverished communities. And last but not least, the criminal justice system. And ladies and gentlemen, that's more than just police reform. That's reform of bail reform. That's looking at arbitrator decisions, because a lot of times we make decisions and they get overturned by the arbitrator. So how we look at the entire criminal justice system. So we try to focus on those key areas in order to try to make sure we have a restoration model for Cleveland.
So, that's the other part of this discussion. I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Griffin, which was in this census report, they talked about the low birth rate that's happening in the country right now. And when we look at the Black community in particular, there are so many different elements that have undercut our life expectancy. The number one being homicides and violence. Then you also are dealing with food issues, with the lack of access to proper foods that leads to, of course, to medical issues. So share with us a little bit about, how is Cleveland doing in that area, making sure that the life of Black people in the city of Cleveland is going to be a fulfilling one.
Well, that's one of the things that we really have focused on is infant mortality. I would tell you, I started out my career trying to address infant mortality. And one of the things that we have to do better as, and that's one of the reasons why I just got back from the National League of Cities, where we can collectively advocate for these things, is how we got to quit allowing the federal government to change the game and the dynamics, because we actually see some success in some of these programs, like infant mortality. When I started in this field approximately in the early 1990s, and we started to see the trajectory of infant mortality and morbidity go down, but then the federal government does what? They yank the programs. And what we got to do is we got to stop allowing people to fund us just enough to fail, which is a lot of times why these things happen and why we got to keep the pressure on. Because right now we're back to where we were in early 1990s, where African-American women are 4 times more likely than their white counterparts to lose a child at childbirth. And it's not because of economic reasons, because there are studies that show they can have the same level of education, the same level of income, the same neighborhood, but because of some of the other microaggressions and some of the other pressures and stressors and other things that African-American women have to endure compared to their white and Hispanic counterparts, they lose babies at a disproportionate rate. And it continues and the cycle continues. And listen, we got to fight every day for every inch in the city of Cleveland. And if we don't take care of people in the dawn of their life and in the dusk of their life, then I think we've all failed as a society. Not just Black people, but white people, Black people, Hispanic people, Asian people. If we don't look at the least of these and try to make sure that all boats are rising, then we'll all fail as a society.
You talked about, Mr. Griffin, that you were part of the National League of Cities, that conference in D.C., and where individuals like yourself and others from around the country, those who are in spaces of power and influence, and we often talk to various local officials about this, but Cleveland seems to be in, like I say, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Baltimore. You have these long-standing historic challenges that has forced to kind of shape the destiny of the city. What is one of the big things that you would say that Cleveland is struggling to get out of that has been a long-standing issue?
Cleveland has failed to reinvent itself, which is decisions that were made a long time ago in order to try to make sure that we keep smart manufacturing and middle-class jobs that put half of us, our parents, and others through college in the city of Cleveland. So what has happened is you move a lot of jobs out of the inner city, move them into the far ring suburbs. People have a hard time getting to those jobs, which has created a talent acquisition problem in the city of Cleveland. We also have not done a good enough job, in my opinion, as Cleveland nor many people in society, of redefining workforce. That factory work and working in clean manufacturing and Industry 4.0 is not working in an old dirty factory, potentially getting mesothelioma. These are good, well-paying jobs that you might just need to go and get an 18-month certificate and make a good family-sustaining wage where you can actually buy a home, create wealth, send your kids to college, and make a good salary. So when we get a chance to work with groups like the National League of Cities and collectively lobby our congressional people and advocate for things like affordable housing, making sure that we fight for workforce opportunities and training dollars, and making sure that we get infrastructure and recreating and reinventing ourselves in the city of Cleveland so that we are not seen as an old Rust Belt city, but we're seen as a city full of innovation, a city full of educated people, and once again, growing the middle class, especially, of course, the African-American middle class, which disproportionately has suffered from redlining and so many other issues over the years.
Absolutely. Mr. Griffin, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, I would like to get your take on the state for the Ohio law against or around the ID situation there. We would love to get your take on that and its impact on voters, as voters are expected to go to the polls within the next few weeks, I've read there in Ohio. So we want to talk a little bit about voter disenfranchisement and ID laws and changes. So we're going to continue our conversation with City Council President Mr. Blaine Griffin of the Cleveland City Council. And folks, I want to hear from you. Crew, post your comments. Let's join us in the chat. You can post your comments on YouTube and Facebook for your questions and for your comments and thoughts for Mr. Blaine Griffin of the Cleveland City Council. Stay with me. We got a lot more to discuss right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shots.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We have been talking to Cleveland City Council President, Mr. Blaine Griffin, who has been talking to us about the population decline in the city of Cleveland and what the city of Cleveland is doing to try to reinvent itself. Now, folks, with the final few moments we have with Mr. Griffin, I would love to pose your questions to get to him so we can have a much more robust conversation about any thoughts that you might have, especially if you're from Cleveland, if you live in the Cleveland area, you see the changes, you see all of the challenges. What do you think? What do you make of the prosperity of the great city of Cleveland? Now, I want to bring Mr. Griffin back into the frame. Mr. Griffin, when we look at not just the population decline, y'all have an upcoming election coming up in the next few weeks. But one of the big things that folks on the ground have been talking about is this latest move by the Ohio government for new ID requirements. And I want to get your take on this and how, if you believe this is a requirement that disenfranchises Black folks, young people, and seniors, especially Black seniors, from getting to the polls and being a part of the process. Here's what we've got about this. Take a look at this, folks. The new voting requirement specifically defines what qualifies as a valid form of ID, acknowledging that not all Ohioans have a current valid driver's license. The law allows residents to get a free state ID card. Sponsors insist that these stringent photo ID demands would fight voter fraud. Now, according to the senator there in Cleveland for the state Senate, she said, Teresa Gavarone, she said, no longer will showing a random bank statement or utility bill be good enough to cast a ballot in our state. Even one person voting illegally in our state is too many. I want to get your take on this, Mr. Griffin. Is this right here? What do you make of this new photo ID requirement for Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of the state? Is this good for voter? Is this good for voter suppression, or does it add to voter suppression?
Heck no. This is actually voter suppression at its highest. This is disenfranchisement, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. And if you're a student of history like I am, Brother Muhammad, you know that this is nothing but a modern day poll tax, where you had to show multiple forms of back in segregation and back in the Jim Crow days when we had to vote. We had to show multiple forms of ID and almost like take a test to prove who you were and where you lived, and then you had to walk to far places. So this adds to the long list of suppression efforts that this state has done. And we should be doing what we can do to help people vote more, as opposed to trying to create more barriers. Let's think about it. Also, a couple of things that they don't tell you is that we're in a populous county where they passed a law to have one drop-off location, and there's approximately 1.5 million people in the state of Ohio. Whereas you go to some other rural places and they have one drop-off location and they have less than a fraction of the population that we have, but they want to create a law that's the same across the board. Not using utility bills, not having IDs. Let me tell you, Ohio is one of 4 states across the country where we have a restoration of rights bill, where once you come out of serving a jail time for a felony, not misdemeanor, you can still vote, even absentee if you have a misdemeanor. But if you have a felony, then you can come back and you can register to vote. In a lot of these areas where it's disenfranchisement taking place, a lot of these guys coming back home have a difficulty finding driver's licenses. So you got all these barriers and nuances in place, and they know exactly who they're trying to target, which is poor BIPOC communities that they're trying to discourage from voting or make it a lot more difficult, because they know young people especially don't have the patience to go through all those hoops and all those loops and chutes and ladders in order to vote.
So how does this even exist? You know, from your vantage point, what needs to be done to challenge this, Mr. Griffin? Because I mean, this is 2023. If we're talking about voter suppression in 2023, and like, yes, I'm a student of history, brother. So, you know, the fact that, and we're seeing this across the board in a lot of states, Republican, you know, governed states and whatnot, we're seeing this level of suppression. And I always wonder, okay, what can be done? How can we challenge this?
Well, we have we're a blue state, we're a blue city in a red state, which most cities are, but we're more so than most. Once you get out of the great state of Cuyahoga, which is what the rest of Ohio calls is pretty conservative, other than maybe parts of Columbus and some of the 8 metro cities. But for the most part, we're outnumbered, like 66 to 33 in the state legislature. So it's very hard to fight it there. I think it's going to have to get taken to court, just like we've had to take several other cases to court in order to try to make sure that we get the outcomes that we're looking for. Because as I mentioned to you earlier, these guys don't share our priorities. They have different priorities at the state level than we do at the city level. And they always pass laws that are, reprehensible to the city of Cleveland and abusive to the city of Cleveland because of our, style, and they don't necessarily align with ours. So we have to actually challenge a lot of these in the courts. But right now, shows like yours, like Black Star, organizations like the National League of Cities, using my platform as council president and the rest of us as council members, black and white, not just white or black, but black and white, everybody, Hispanic and all, needs to be outraged about this. Because one thing I would tell you is I'm a big movie fan, and one of my favorite movies is Usual Suspects. And in the movie, they have a great line that says that the worst trick that the devil ever played on mankind is to convince them that he didn't exist. This is racism at its best, and they have a plan on trying to undermine our voting power, and we have to stop it.
Absolutely, brother. Truth is power. You checked in and said, look, I don't know if the population decline is because of people leaving, because there were reported as 372,000 people didn't register on the census. That could make a difference, right? Yeah, absolutely. Are we finding, and to add to that point, truth is power, now, Mr. Griffin, are we finding that in terms of voting, what's the voting numbers in the city of Cleveland? Are people coming out and getting involved in elections at this point? Or
no, especially the last 10 years, voter turnout has been very, very low. Even in the last mayor and council election, it was only 13 to 15%. Now, I do have a theory that it is tied, as your workers said, as your supporters said, is that, I think a lot of it is population decline. I don't think the voter rolls are accurate. I think a lot of people have died off. I think a lot of people have moved out the city and moved to inner ring suburbs. So I think that we got to do a lot to clean up the voter rolls in order to get more accuracy in voter turnout, because I think that the rolls are inaccurate, but I don't believe in massive purges and those kind of things either. I think we just have to do a better job of re-registering and getting accurate numbers and actually starting to get our people to the polls. But let's face it, as I tell you, people are dealing with tough times right now, the economy, inflation, crime. A lot of people are just frustrated and discouraged right now. And that's why folks like you and myself and others have to keep up the fight, because one day we got to really press that button to really make sure that, as one of your followers said, never allow anybody to just discourage you or take your vote away. It's your right to participate in this society, and we need everybody to do it.
Absolutely. Lori checked in. Lori, you said we've been fighting voters' depression before I was born, and I'm a child of the 60s and before that. That's the other implication of the situation, Mr. Griffin, is that as we're next year we're talking about a presidential election. More likely on the Democratic side, it's going to be President Joe Biden. We don't know what the word is on the Republican side just yet. But more importantly, getting people out to the polls. Now, I'm a registered voter. I understand the importance of it. But at the end of the day, Mr. Griffin, let's keep it 100. Let's keep it a buck, brother. Folks ain't getting what they want, who they voting for. They not, and even if they don't get who they vote for, they're not getting any of their interests met when folks come into power, especially when you see black people in power, right? Like when you see black people in power, and this is no shade on you, but when you see our people in power in political positions, it becomes a coin toss whether that person is in power for the people or in power for themselves. And I think that has done more damage to voter empathy in the black community than any other policy. To see our people who we have championed to be a voice, to have championed to be a game changer, get into the system only to disappoint us because they were only in the system for themselves. That, I think, has done more damage than some policy from a lawmaker. Talk to me about what's your take on that?
Brother Muhammad, you couldn't be more right. A lot of people get into this business in order to promote themselves, and I will tell you that that's done more damage and irreparable harm to anybody than anything else in this world. And let me say this, sir. I just use myself as an example. I'm one of those type of people that I never left the neighborhood. I live right at the corner of MLK, Woodland, and Larchmere, which is the intersection where there's a lot of poverty, but then there's also middle-class families. And I made it a point, my wife and myself, in my life to say that we were going to stay and fight. We got to quit running away from these problems or running from community to community to try to be accepted and assimilate, and stand firm where we are and start having proud and quit trying to be like other people. I think that, that's what the problem is, that people try to go to some other culture or communities in order to find their norms. And we got to make sure that we start elevating people where we're at, as opposed to continue to run from it. I will tell you that it takes a tremendous amount of sacrifice to do these jobs. They often don't pay as well as the corporate sector. There's a lot of time and a lot of bashing that you have to have, a lot of Twitter abuse. But at the end of the day, if you really love your people, and I once heard Farajii say this when I had an opportunity to meet him, is that he said, you got to love your people to lead your people. And that's something that I really strongly believe in. And I think we got to have people that are more convicted and committed, not to just being politicians, which everybody's turned into a dirty word, but public servants. You're a public servant. I'm a public servant. If you're passing out food in a food line in a shelter, public servant. We got to have more public servants and less politicians.
Oh my goodness. You're speaking to my soul now, Mr. Griffin, brother. You're speaking to my soul. No, I love it. I love it. All my time and all my years of doing this work, I've never thought of that as being the case, but you're absolutely right. I think that we can now start to create, redefine what it means to be a public servant. If you're espousing any type of knowledge, you're a public servant. If you're doing something of service for another human being, you're a public servant. If you are like in the position that you're in, helping to create policy for a better quality of life, you're a public servant. You are absolutely correct. Mr. Griffin, as we close out here, we got about 30 seconds. Is there anything that you want us to know about the great city of Cleveland and what's the future and what's going to be the future moving forward?
I just say this to you quickly, just on the public service. I would have been a pastor, but once in a while I like to drink whiskey and cuss, so I didn't think I'd be a good fit for that job. You know what I mean? So let me say this about Cleveland, man. Cleveland is a great city. We have a great water source. We have one of the most livable cities that you can imagine because it's easy to navigate. I just got back from Washington, D.C. We don't have near the amount of traffic. It's affordable. And if anything, COVID-19 exacerbated some of these issues, but it also showed us the opportunities to make Cleveland better through our healthcare systems, our smart manufacturing, and making sure that we attract young professionals back to the city of Cleveland. Because if we capture that crowd, we can grow this city and answer some of the population dynamics that you're talking about. But Cleveland is a great city. With all of the challenges that we have, this is a great community. And man, I love this city. I love the people. I love everything about it, the restaurants. I am Cleveland's ambassador. And believe me, I want all of y'all to come visit.
There it is right there. Cleveland City Council President, Mr. Blaine Griffin, brother, you are always welcome to join us back here on this platform to bring us any updates and latest developments about the great city of Cleveland. But we thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you so much, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's check in with writer Chandra Gulick to talk about her story as she asked the question, "Are you my mother?" We're going to check in with her along with Brother Michael and Hotep. And then later on, we got another big development in the reparations conversation here in the state of California. We're going to also check in with Brother Michael about that. So stay with us. A lot to talk about in the next hour of The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in. First and foremost, just before we get into our next conversation, make sure you do your due diligence to support us here at Black Star Network. You can go directly to our website at blackstarnetwork.com, blackstarnetwork.com, and make sure that you let your friends and family know that Black digital media is here and we're here to stay. Your support means everything. You heard that from Brother Roland himself, who serves as our founder and curator of this fantastic network. But your support means everything. So make sure that you support us. Go to blackstarnetwork.com. Also share the content with your friends and family. And of course, follow us on social media at Black Star Network on both Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well. All right, so thank you for your support. Okay, folks, for our next conversation, I want to talk to a writer who has written a very, very powerful story, and it's a story of reconnecting with her family, a story of understanding, but it's also a story of DNA, about cancel culture, and so much more. So we want to welcome to the airways here at Black Star Network writer Chandra Gulick. Chandra, thank you so much for checking in this afternoon. How are you today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk with you today.
Absolutely. Chandra, let's talk a little bit about this powerful story that you wrote. Are You My Mother?
Are You My Mother?
Come on, let's talk about this. Now, talk to us. First and foremost, what is this story all about?
The story is about, it starts out this woman who's single in her 30s. She gets this email out of the blue saying, your mother is not really your mother. Your mother is actually my mother, and she needs a kidney transplant. So it goes from there because, getting an email talking about, your mother is not really your mother. She's like, what? And then so it starts this whole chain of events of like her trying to figure out her real story and what's the truth, really, and finding her family, her biological family, and kind of like navigating through what does biological family mean, what does adoptive family mean, or honorary family mean, and what lengths will you go to for your family, and what does that really mean? So that's the essence. I don't want to give too many spoilers.
No, we don't want you to give too many spoilers. But what was the inspiration behind this story, Chandra?
So the inspiration, actually, I had been thinking about writing for a while, and I just, I actually was inspired by my own story. So I'm actually white, but
I like how you said that one.
So my name is Chandra, and my skin is kind of like olive tone, and so it's something that I personally have gone through my life where people are kind of confused about my ethnicity, and they're asking questions. And so I just started thinking like, what if it really was true that I had different parents, and how would that play out? And you got to keep it fiction, so you can like put all kinds of stuff in there. People don't know what's true and what's like, right. You really just made it up. So yeah, that's where it came from. And then I just started digging into what could the circumstances be. And, the kidney donor thing and the kidney transplant is super common, but I was looking into, what are the things like bone marrow, the other things that people would be looking for a donor. And, so I did a ton of research for this book, and it was so interesting. And I ended up connecting with a lot of different people, doing interviews, connected with a Black transplant surgeon. And I learned so much about like kidney disease and dialysis, transplant process. And she's, doing research in disparities between Blacks and whites in the transplant process. So the whole thing is it was really eye-opening for me, and just a way to really get people thinking about these things without, writing a news story about it or being like really aggressive about it. I guess I'm more of like let's just plant a couple ideas, get to know some characters, and then you start to care about the characters and what they're going through. And so just another way to, impact the culture like your show is talking about, all about. So that was kind of how I got into it.
So when we have these conversations, and I think this is interesting because now we're in a space, right, where culturally, I think there are more people that are interested in their family history and are interested in really finding out who they are and why they are a certain way because of their families, right? We hear these stories. I remember I talked to an older woman who was in her 70s, and she did not know that her parents were white. Her biological parents were white because as a child, she was raised by Black parents, but she was fair-skinned. She wasn't, you could not tell.
Yeah.
So she didn't find out until decades later that her biological parents were white. And now, even to this day, she's like, well, I have a Black husband, I have Black children, I am a Black woman. And that's how I identify as. And I think it's fascinating that we are in a time now where people are like really pushing back on the labels and identity that the world has bestowed upon them.
Right.
I think that's the fascinating part about this, right? I remember having a conversation with some friends, and I'm saying that this is like when we're talking about, people say, well, this is my label, or I'm not this gender. I think this is an outgrowth of people being so dissatisfied with white supremacy, dictating who people are. And now people are at a space and at a point where we're just like, you know what? I'm going to tell you how I want you to see me. I'm going to show you. I'm going to present myself to the world. Can you speak to that? Because this is quite interesting.
Right. So interesting. Well, I have to just piggyback off of that because I found that there's this whole community, and they're called late discovery adoptees, and they have like Facebook groups, and they let me join their group so I could like find out that it's, you see these commercials, ancestry.com, 23andMe, whatever. Hey, get these DNA tests for like a Christmas Christmas gift for your family. Well, they are not really presenting the idea that you could find some stuff out that you weren't planning to. Like, so people are finding stuff out. And now that we're in the era of DNA testing, like you can't keep these family secrets anymore. So if there is something like that, it's coming out. Someone in the family is going to get tested. And so I was, just got into this whole community. And right, it's what you're saying. It's kind of like, what do you identify yourself as? And, even I heard this quote, or I can't remember exactly where I read it, but they were talking about like, well, for me personally, I probably have like 10% Irish in me or something, but the world is not like, oh, you're Irish because you have 10% Irish, but as African Americans, it's like, that's how the US has set this whole thing up. Like, you have, the one drop rule, like, this is who you are. But like,
Yeah.
who is to say, like, okay, who made that rule? Of course
Yeah.
it was the white structure, right? And so yeah, it's just so interesting to say, like, okay, well, yeah, I am gonna identify myself for what I identify as, and this is what it is. And so it's really been fascinating to just think about these ideas of our self perception and how we perceive, how we present to the world. And even as I was saying, like, people not knowing how to interpret me, and how for me, so it's been an interesting journey to be able to kind of like switch, in one group, and I kind of just blend in, so it's not to say like I'm telling people that I'm Black or anything, but that people just treat you how they treat you. They decide, like, this is what you are, and so this is the category I'm putting you in. So it is really interesting questions. And
do you find that as a white woman, that do you see that the system of labels and the system of genealogy, and just how this country have the conversation about who we are and where we come from, does it hit different for white people than it does for Black people? I mean, when I say hit different, I'm talking about, do other white people say, you know what, this is crazy that you can, when I look at the Census Bureau, when I look at a census form, I can just put down white. But for Black people, they got to, you got to self-identify in a lot of other categories. I mean, are these conversations happening in white communities based on your experience?
I think they are happening. I think, what you see in the media is always going to be the extremes. And even I was reading the book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? It's this classic book. And she just talks about, like, there is this, as a white person, like, if we're recognizing these things, we're almost like ashamed to be white, because we're horrible. But so she was even talking about learning the history of whites who have been allies with, from the civil rights, from even back to abolishing slavery. And so there is a history of, white allies or white people who are like, what are you guys doing? This is crazy. This makes no sense, but the people they're going to show in the media, they're going to be like, all right, there's, these extreme. And the same thing for African Americans, I'm sure. Like, it's like, wait a second, that person doesn't represent me that they're showing, but this is what the media is portraying. We're so many different things, right? But yeah, we are having these conversations, and there's plenty of white people out here that are not, like, we're like, this makes no sense. We are trying to educate ourselves even more. I mean, even myself, like, I'm still trying to like learn, and I have even changed my own understanding over the past like 5 years or whatever. And I live in Baltimore City. It's a huge part of my life of like, look, I just drive down the street and just to say, like, what is going on? This is not okay. It's not okay. And
so you're like going through an awakening process then.
Not going through an awakening process, but just kind of like maturity, more maturity. Gotcha. I think, of course, everything has become more and more in the public conversation, and people are, so even like people who thought they were an ally or thought they knew what they were, thought like, oh yeah, I'm supporting or I'm fighting. It's like, even, just the conversations are still pushing our understanding forward. And so.
Oh, absolutely. Look, we got to take a quick pause.
Okay.
Sandra, when we come back, I want to bring another voice into the conversation, Michael and Hotep, to talk to us a little bit about what his take is as he studies race and history. And, he's a historian and scholar. But I think this is all very, very interesting and it's fascinating. And I'm so happy that you wrote a book talking about this experience of DNA and genealogy and just finding who you are, because I think it's so timely right now, given the fact that we are in a space where history, especially Black history, is being challenged. So it's becoming a real trial for Black people, for younger Black people, to figure out, okay, who am I? Where do I come from? What was my history in this country? So this is absolutely fascinating. Folks, I want you to stay with us. I want you to pose your questions for author C.H. Avosa to talk to us about, to share your thoughts about this. Willie, I got your question, brother, so I'm going to get to you as soon as we come back. But folks, stay with us. We'll continue the conversation on the other side, right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20036-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We've been chatting with author C.H. Avosa, who's been talking about her new book, Are You My Mother? A book about a woman taking a journey to understand where she came from and even doing the what some would believe to be an absolutely miraculous thing of giving away a kidney, but all in an attempt to find out who she is and where she came from. Very, very powerful story. And it's all rooted in my hometown, the great city of Baltimore. So I'm really excited about it. But we have Ms. C.H. Avosa joining us this afternoon. I want to bring in Brother Michael Hotep. Brother Michael, thank you so much, brother, for checking in as always. I want to get
Thanks,
your take.
Farajii.
You're welcome, brother. I want to get your take on this conversation, Brother Michael, because you study history. You often talk about, the importance of going back. Look at where you came from. This is something that you often advocate here on this platform and other spaces. What do you make of this, brother? You know what I mean? This yearning, this desire that a lot of people are finally having to say, you know what? I'm going to self-identify. I'm going to figure out who I am and where I came from. And I'm going to do this in a very, very self-affirming way without being canceled. And we got to talk about that, CH. You got it without being canceled as well. So what's your take on this, brother?
Well, it's important to understand your history, your family background, because that helps make you you. And with things like ancestry.com and African ancestry, people are doing DNA analysis. They're finding out more about where they come from, regardless of race or ethnicity. They're finding out more about that and finding out more about their family members, their family tree, etc. So that and it brings about a greater respect for your ancestors when you find out more about their successes and trials and tribulations, what they were able to accomplish in life. And then, for African Americans, you have many of us who are trying to do the same thing. Now, we're starting at a greater deficit as a result of the transatlantic slave trade than many other people are. We've been largely stripped of our history, culture, language, spiritual systems, names, folklores, mores, cosmology, cosmogony, family ties, land, etc. But many of us are trying to put back those fragmented pieces to become a whole people again as well. So this is extremely important and is not that far-fetched either. Just reading the brief synopsis of Chandra's book here. It's a fictional story of a woman with a Spanish name, dark-skinned, raised in a white family. Well, we do know that you had African people all throughout Mexico. And also a lot of Mexicans have Spanish background because Mexico was conquered by the Spaniards. They were conquered by Spain. And then you had Africans who were enslaved, who were taken into Spanish colonies because the Spanish were the second ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade. One of the places they were taken into is going to be Mexico and then various Spanish colonies. But we also understand when you study the Olmecs and you read page 82 of Dr. David M. Hotep's book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, the Olmecs were a mixture of what we would call Native Americans as well as Africans like the Mandinka or the Manding, as well as the ancient Kemetic people or the Kemites from ancient Egypt. So that's not too far-fetched.
Absolutely. Not too far-fetched at all. And Chandra, did you go that far back into the history as you were researching and preparing to put out this work?
It's funny that you asked that. I didn't go all the way back, but I didn't go that far back. So thank you for sharing that. But I did have to create a whole family tree. I went on a DNA, not a genealogy site to create a family tree and go back to get this whole thing organized, because there's these trees and, all these people involved. And then there's a little switch, that happens. And so I didn't go back that far, but I did talk about how does the family end up in Boston? How did the then how did they end up in Baltimore? And so the movements, I talked about the Great Migration coming from the South to the cities in the North. And so all of that stuff is integrated. And I think, you're saying, that people are really trying to go back and find out what's going on. I just finished reading the book Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, and it was just amazing to watch that story unfold, going back from being in Africa and the different tribes, and then each generation coming through, and then you get here to today in America. And I feel that even just reading that story was so powerful because it was, that's what people really want. They want to say, like, here's the stories of my family history, and these are the people. It's not just, as an African American, it's not just about we were slaves and we have no history. I mean, obviously there's history there that has been lost, like you were saying, that it is harder to dig into that. But I mean, there were people that existed, that there's this family line that came down, and yeah, people want to know that. And so the DNA testing has been really interesting, because it is a little dicey. It can get a little dicey. Like, what are they doing with the DNA? Like I was saying, like they sell it like, oh, it's this family thing, and you'll find out about these great things about your ancestors. And it's like, sometimes it's not that, and so it's an interesting time that we're living in, for sure.
Very interesting. And very interesting. I want to go to Willie. Willie, you checked in and posed a couple of questions. One, you said to Chandra, where did your parents come up with your name? And then Willie said, man, I just saw a brother convicted on a cold case because of one of those DNA databases. I want to buy, I'm not trying to get one of my cousins convicted. So a couple of things is your name. Where did that come from, Chandra? And then talking about the DNA, I guess a DNA kit is essentially what Willie is inquiring about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my name Chandra is just, my parents liked it. My dad was a student in DC public schools, and I think it was one of his students' names. So it probably was, an African American student who had the name, but it is actually an Indian name. So in India, it's actually a really common name, Chandra. So I don't know. Yeah, you don't run into it that much, but people in the US, they just think like, oh, it's more of a Black name. So yeah. But yeah, I saw your comment about the DNA convictions. And I mean, all of that stuff that's what I'm saying about the DNA databases, and like thinking through, like, is it worth it to put my DNA out there? Personally, I haven't done it, and I'm not planning to, because I don't know what they're going to do with it. But yeah, I think you do have to weigh those questions of what are they going to do with it? Are they going to, will they use it to convict someone in my family or whatever? It's a great question that he said.
Absolutely. Brother Michael, as we close out on this part of the conversation, when we're talking about, of course, talking to our people about, trying to find their roots, right? What would you recommend as being the start for that? Because do we go to our grandparents? Do we go to someone in the family? How do we make sure that our family does this part to preserve? Like Chandra said, she had to create like a family tree. Right. I remember sitting down with my mom, and she pulling out the photo album, this big old plastic book, man, and open that up with the plastic pages, and she literally had the big tree and names written on the tree, on the branches.
Right.
So is that like, how do we get back to that place?
Okay,
because
so
I think that's a powerful situation. That's a powerful tradition that can be passed on from generation to generation.
Right. Number one, talk to the elders in the families, the grandparents, the great grandparents, the uncles, the aunts, things like this. Video record them as well. So once they pass on, you can still show those videos to future generations. Video record them. Also go to the family Bibles in various households, because a lot of those family Bibles will have birth records, dates of birth, and different information like that. Also go to photo albums as well and document that. Scan those pictures, back them up on hard drives so you can preserve that. And then also have family reunions. Also at the family reunions, you can bring families together across the country, and you can have a presentation of the genealogy. If you can't do if you can't have a physical family reunion, have a virtual family reunion through Zoom or one of the other platforms that allow you to do that, and incorporate the children into putting together the family tree also, so they can learn this history at the same time. So it shouldn't just be the adults that teach about the family tree, incorporate the children into the process as well, and putting together the project and have them present some of that also. So that's how we start reclaiming that history and putting together those pieces of the family tree.
I like that. I like that. Chandra, I want to just say thank you so much. How can folks get a copy of your book, Are You My Mother?
It's available on Amazon, anywhere you buy books. Like, you can go to my website, chavosabooks.com, and that has all the ways to get it. But really, you can go to your local bookstore. You can go, it's available everywhere. I saw Amazon has it on sale for $4 right now. So that's a really good deal, I have to say. I don't even know how they managed to do that. But if you want to support like local bookstores, like, don't buy the $4 one. I don't know.
Right. Well, I truly appreciate you. Fascinating story, and more importantly, is the even greater conversation to have that we should keep having. So I appreciate you for putting out the story, and I thank you for joining us here on The Culture on the Black Star Network. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about the latest developments in the fight for reparations in the state of California. Stay with us. It's the Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape. With me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Let's talk about reparations. Another development came up over the past couple of days, and as it relates to reparations for the state of California. Of course, California has been on the forefront creating a reparations task force, which is deemed with having the conversations and really creating a model on how the state of California, one of the largest states in the country, could possibly issue reparations. Now, there have been much talk about this, and I want to bring my brother Michael and Hotep back into the conversation as we look at this situation of reparations in the state of California. But here's the big development is, Brother Michael, is the cost, a budget-busting cost for the state of California. Take a look at this, folks. It could cost California more than $800 billion to compensate Black residents for generations of over-policing, disproportionate incarceration, and housing discrimination, economists have told a state panel considering reparations. The preliminary estimate is more than 2.5 times more than California's $300 billion annual budget, and does not include a recommended $1 million per older Black resident for health disparities that have shortened their average lifespan, nor does the figure count for compensating people for property unjustly taken by the government or devaluing Black businesses. And it says that for devaluing Black businesses, 2 other harms the task force says the state perpetuated. Wow. $800 billion. Brother Michael.
Right. Yeah, don't hold your breath on that. That's not going to happen. That's more than 2.5 times the annual budget of California. The annual budget is $300 billion. So I appreciate the economists doing their calculations, but at the end of the day, and I'm all for repairing the damage of slavery, racism, Jim Crow segregation, redlining, housing discrimination, educational discrimination when it comes to getting bank loans and home loans and all of that. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you think that you're owed. The only thing that matters is how much you can collect, or what you can collect, and what you can actually keep once it goes to court and you get sued and people try to block you from getting what you say that you're owed. Okay, so when we look at this, so 2 developments happened. Number one, there was the article from ABC Channel 7, abc7.com, which they picked up from the Associated Press, called Reparations for Black Californians Could Top $800 billion. And this was what economists came up with. And as you stated, it didn't include theft of land and different things like this, right? Secondly, the article that came out today from the Associated Press, March 30th, 2023, California reparations amount, if any, left to politicians, because the California Reparations Task Force is leaving it up to the politicians in the state assembly in California to really put a price tag on it and determine what should be paid out. They refer to Attorney Camila Moore, the leader of California's first in the nation reparations task force, on Wednesday, March 29th, said it won't take a stance on how much the state could compensate Black residents whom economists estimate may be owed more than $800 billion for decades of over-policing, disproportionate incarceration, and housing discrimination. So I think it's good that they don't put a price tag on it now, the California Reparations Task Force, because whatever price tag you put on it, and the greater the price tag, the more it's going to be attacked. Because in the article from ABC Channel 7, they also talk about the argument against reparations as well. So you have to defend yourself and strengthen your argument to defend against those arguments against reparations. One of them is that, well, you know, there was somebody they quoted to say, well, my family came here. They were white, of course. They said, my family came here after slavery ended and didn't have anything to do with slavery, things like this. Now, it's important to understand, I encourage everybody who's watching this, I encourage you to read at least the executive order, the executive summary, I should say, the 28-page executive summary from the California Reparations Task Force 500-page report. Because if you read that executive summary, it gives you a greater understanding of U.S. history and what happened to us, as well as history of California, and it outlines 12 harms. It outlines 12 harms: political disenfranchisement, racial terror, housing discrimination, separate and unequal education, racism in environment and infrastructure, pathologizing the Black family, control over creative, cultural, and intellectual life, stolen and hindered opportunity, unjust legal system, mental and physical harm and neglect, and the wealth gap as well. Okay, so the best strategy in California and nationally at the federal level to get something tangible that we can keep, because with 13.5% of the population nationwide, California, African Americans are 5.5% to 6% of the population. Shift the focus away from talking about slavery, because California really does not have a history of slavery. They've identified about 1,500 African Americans that were in a semi-slavery status of 1850 and afterward, when California came into the Union as a free state. Shift the focus to present day structural inequities. Deal with the laws and policies that were put in place to bring about those structural inequities. And then you can trace that back into history and show how it's related to slavery. But the main one of the most important things we have to understand is take the title reparations off of it. The reason why is when you talk about reparations and you put that title on what it is that you want, you automatically bring up a whole lot of resistance to it from the larger community before you even get to talk about what it is that you want. Okay, so take the title off of it.
Market it differently.
You gotta market it totally different. When you are the minority population in the city, state, country, and the majority of the people that gotta vote for what you want are white. Okay, you've got to market it different if you actually want to accomplish something and be able to keep what you want. Okay,
all right, so let me ask you
just real quick. Focus on the policies that you want and push the policies that you want. One, two, show how those policies will not just help you, but how repairing that damage will also help the larger community, the country, etc. You have to market this differently.
One of the things that you mentioned was, the approach that the Reparations Task Force is taking, which is allowing the state government to determine what the price should be.
Because the state government has to vote on this.
Because they got to vote on it.
Yes.
So my thinking is, and my question to you, Brother Michael, is that an effective strategy, considering the fact that, you have an economist that's throwing it out there, 800 billion.
That ain't gonna happen.
Right? Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen either. I mean, the state is not going to give up 2.5 times more of its budget for a single group of people.
For 5.5% of the population of California, 6%? Hell no. Just like in California, that's not, and just like in San Francisco. Okay.
But should we be determining? I guess my question would be: should the task force determine what the cost should be? Because if you put it in the hands of politicians, couldn't we shortchange? Wouldn't that put us in a position to shortchange ourselves? If they say, we want to give y'all 200 million, or okay, let's say we'll give you 100 million.
I would focus on the policies that you need to repair the damage. Okay. If you read the 28-page executive summary, have you read the executive summary?
Not yet.
Read it. If you read the 28-page executive summary, those different harms that I talked about, they go through and explain those harms, how they took place in California, and how they harmed African Americans. It was laws and policies that inflicted the harm upon us and continue to do it. It's going to be laws and policies that correct the harm. Cash payments can be part of, and once again, we have to have comprehensive reparations. Cash payments can be part of a comprehensive repairing of the damage or dealing with the structural inequities. But when you start coming out with these amounts that are greater, 2.5 times greater than your annual budget, or 7 times greater than your annual budget, like in San Francisco, that's not going to happen. And what happens is that the opposition attacks those huge numbers without getting any other details.
Right.
They just attack those huge numbers.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Let me go to the culture crew and get their take on this. Because this is, and again, like you said, like this could, by an economist putting this type of information out there, it does more harm than good to the larger effort, right?
And they probably meant well. The economists probably meant well with it.
Right.
But see, it's just like San Francisco, right? The $5 million per eligible African American. If 20,000 out of 50,000 African Americans qualify for that, you're talking about $100 billion. That's 7 times greater. That's 7 times the annual budget of San Francisco, which has a $14 billion annual budget, and they're facing a $728 million budget deficit over the next 2 years. That's fantasy. That's fantasy. Now, at the meeting where that was proposed in San Francisco, there were 111 policy recommendations made. They don't even get a second look because people are focused on Fantasy Island. And that's how you tank the whole reparations movement, by just putting these numbers out here. Even though people mean well, focus on the policies that you need, push the policies to repair the damage, as opposed to these huge dollar amounts that are astronomical. Even though you could say, hey, we are owed this, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what we think we're owed or what we can even prove. What matters is what you can actually collect and keep after you get sued.
Absolutely. I'm gonna stop the conversation right there, because I think that's the salient point. It's about what you can collect. Like, you got to come to the
collect
table
and keep.
And collect and keep. And you got to come to the table with something reasonable. Otherwise, they might throw the whole thing out the window.
Exactly. And if you look at the executive order that President Joe Biden did on student loan forgiveness, absolutely, is definitely needed. What he did is reasonable, but it's being tied up in court because you have Republicans suing. Hopefully, the 6-3 conservative Supreme Court will rule in his favor, which is our favor as well, because it greatly benefits African Americans. But it's based upon what you can actually keep. That's what we have to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Brother Michael, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, brother. Real quick, talk to us about the work you're doing.
TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I teach online history classes on Saturdays and Sundays. Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next class, April 1st. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, where they didn't teach you in school. And you can register for the full course. Full course is on sale, only $80. You can register per class if you want to, which is only $10. And then on Sundays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., I teach Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Okay, we go through and look at history chronologically to understand what happened to us after slavery ended, what led up to the Civil War taking place, what were the laws and policies to put us in the predicament we are in today, to understand where we need to go from here. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Visit our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can watch the classes live or on demand, and the content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children and your family as well. TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com.
There it is, Brother Michael Imhotep. You can find him weekly here on The Culture, as well as Roland Martin Unfiltered. We always appreciate our brother checking in. Thank you, Brother
All right,
Michael.
thanks, Farajii. All right,
yes,
peace.
sir. Peace. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. But I thank each and every one of you for joining us in the conversation. Big shout out to my beautiful Culture crew. Always putting in the work, always showing their support, and always telling people, make sure you hit that like button. Yes, folks, make sure you hit that like button. But also, not just hitting the like button on YouTube, go to our website today at blackstarnetwork.com. blackstarnetwork.com. Do your due diligence. Support us, as we need your financial support to continue to build out this fantastic platform, this digital media space that we are building, a space that is gaining momentum each day. But we need your support to keep things going. So make sure you do your part. Give today to help us out at blackstarnetwork.com. Also, make sure you share the content and follow us on all social media at Black Star Network. And also, while you're on there on social media, follow yours truly, Farajii Muhammad. You can follow me at The Real Farajii on Instagram and Farajii on Twitter. And I would love to connect with you folks and continue to build out the community. I am so excited. I want to thank C.H. Avosa. I want to thank Brother Michael Imhotep. I want to thank our the City Council President from Cleveland, Mr. Blaine Griffin, for joining us this afternoon. And most importantly, I want to thank my team, King Keenan, my man Joel, and my control room. And I want to thank you, my Culture crew, for tuning in today for another great show. Stay tuned. Up next is Roland Martin Unfiltered. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we will talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture. Right here, only here, exclusively here on the Black Star Network. Talk to you soon. Have a great afternoon and evening, and we'll talk later. Peace.